You're about to listen to the definitive Michael Jackson podcast. Christianic CY review covering Las Vegas and the world. This week, a biopic comes out about the life of Michael Jackson titled Michael. With that being said, we revisit our 2009 CY review right after Michael Jackson died with Sony executives Cory, Rooney, and Chris Apostle. It's a definitive CY interview and a definitive podcast on who Michael Jackson was. This CY interview has been seen by over 100,000 people in countries around the world. Please take the time to listen to this almost 1 hour CY interview right now.
This is Chris Shandek, and you're on CYInterview.com, where we have brought you over 1,000 of the biggest and brightest names in news, sports, and entertainment. With the world mourning the death of Michael Jackson, many views, stories, and perspectives are coming out on the King of Pop's life. Former Sony executives and two of music's biggest players have a different perspective than the media is telling. Chris Apostle and songwriter-producer Cory Rooney discuss what Michael really contributed to the music world. Rooney also discusses being an ally of Michael during his time at Sony, and how Jackson told Cory that he would never tour again because it would kill him, besides many other things. The forthcoming interview is a view of the life of Michael Jackson that you won't get anywhere else from two men who have worked with everyone in the industry.
He has worked with everybody from Jennifer Lopez to Mary J. Blige to Destiny's Child. He is the producer and a former senior Sony executive. Cory Rooney, thank you for joining me today. And also I have with you a former Sony executive and co-owner of Triangle Management, Chris Apostle. Gentlemen, thank you both for being here this evening. I really appreciate it. And I want to start off by saying, first off, I'm Cory. You know, you had a chance to work with Michael. You wrote and produced some songs with him. What was your relationship like with him?
You know, it's funny. Someone asked me this the other day, and I said, I waited all my life and my career pretty much to finally get a chance to work with Michael, be recognized, to have my talents recognized by Michael. And, when it came time finally for us to get in the studio, we spent more time, we spent almost a month of just talking, and he was educating me on, like, so many different things. I mean, we barely got a lot of music done. It was a completely different experience than what I thought it was going to be.
Kind of like almost an utter distraction, like, not getting work done and just talking about a bunch of other things.
Yeah, and then the relationship quickly turned into me being an executive at the time. I think, I felt like my strength for him at the time was more so than being a writer or producer for him, but to be his inside man at the time, because it was weird. He felt like at the time at Sony that he didn't really have any allies or anyone that was going to be in his corner.
Really?
It was amazing, yeah. So I quickly became his number one ally at the company.
Mm-hmm. And so what did you learn from him, in that time that you became his ally, like who he was? And it just seems like there were just always people trying to leech off of him and telling him to do one thing or another, and it seemed like he didn't have a lot, at some points, control of his life. Am I right?
Yeah. I mean, that's that you hit it on the head. I mean, it was to the point. The first thing I started to learn about him was that he's always so eager to please. He was so eager to please that he kind of overthought a lot of things. It's like he would have an album done, and I would listen to all this music and say, Michael, this is unbelievable. Yeah, but I don't think it's ready yet. Because he's got a million people in his ear telling him different things in different directions, and he was easily led in all sorts of directions by people, and I was amazed by the fact that he was so easily led.
Yeah, Chris, I have to say, for more than a decade there, you were a major player at Sony Music Entertainment. What were your dealings with Michael, and what did you learn about him while he was with, obviously, Sony?
Well, my dealings, unlike Cory, were very limited. The actual time I spent with him was just a couple of days. He was doing a mix of a track with Jay-Z, and Jay-Z had already become quite a player in the business. And I just remember walking in the studio before Michael had gotten there, and Jay-Z was working on lyrics for what he was going to do. And I just remember that Jay-Z almost was, I never saw him so humble. And he was almost like a little bit nervously excited that he was working with Michael Jackson, and that left a lasting impression to me. I mean, I'm older than Cory, and I've grown up with Michael, since he began. But the thing that I learned on the inside from the Sony side was most people, the executives, like Cory was saying, giving him direction, all these ideas, what he should do and shouldn't do. The thing that I think was most forgotten about Michael and what he did was Michael was always working on music. You know, you hear all the other stuff going on and everything, but it's funny, you watch like a recent interview, that Martin Bashir thing, and Martin was saying, well, you know, it's good that you're working on music again, and it was extremely poignant to me when Michael said, I've always been working on music. I mean, what do you think, Cory? He probably has a couple hundred tracks finished sitting in the tank somewhere.
Well, there was a news report that I wrote an article the other day, and he has 200 unpublished songs that are left to his children that they can profit off, and it's valued at somewhere near $60 million, for example, Chris.
Right.
You
and
know.
I believe that was kind of like the old Motown way. Stevie Wonder has over 2,000 songs that he's stored and and put away for the same purpose. And true, Michael was always working on music, always working on music. But like I said, he was never really satisfied with himself.
Well, I have to ask you both. We'll start with Cory, and then we'll go to Chris. I mean, the comments he made about Tommy Mottola, many years ago, the comments he wasn't happy, even though the album he had released back in 2002, there was $30 million put behind it. But were you surprised when he made those very, candid comments, calling, Tommy Mottola a bunch of different things? Surprised, not surprised?
I was not surprised. Like I said, he didn't really feel like he had a lot of people in his corner at the record company, and for the most part, he I don't think people really showed him the love and respect that they should have been showing him at the record company. And true, they may have spent $30 million on the record, but at the same time, the business affairs on that record was set up to the point where Michael couldn't win if he wanted to win. You understand? I mean, they set it up and they put such a high marker on the record, in terms of his recoupment and things like that, that it was like kind of a lose-lose situation. Mm-hmm. And they did that like to dangle a carrot to say, okay, well, we want you to do the full thing. We want you to sell records. We want you to tour. We want you to, they thought that he was going to go running after the carrot saying, man, I got to do all of this so that I can recoup.
Yeah. Chris, thoughts?
Well, a powerful artist like Michael, he's not the first artist that has ever decided, when he's not comfortable at his home, i.e. the label, to sit there and decide that he's going to take some shots and say his piece. Like, when artists at his level aren't comfortable, they say things. And someone like him, who only dealt with the top level, Japan and Mottola and stuff like that, he came out and he said his thing. And I'm sure the frustration level was out of control. I mean, there's a lot of circumstances that pushed him to that point. A thing that I'm still brutally offended about, and it's only a rumor, but it's something that I really believe, is I really think that he got blackmailed in that whole scandal thing. And I think at some point the truth will come out. This man gave people millions and millions of dollars. His philanthropic stuff never comes out, what he did. And I think his reactions were natural. And I'm sure he was getting pushed. I mean, if you look at the quality of his work, Chris, I mean, go back to Off the Wall, which is my favorite Michael Jackson record. But every single record, I don't care, you go to Dangerous, any single one, these records are perfect. Blue Book standard records, nothing but hits. I mean, Cory and I sat in an office in Sony once and watched a concert, a live DVD. A colleague of ours, Ron Grant, called us in and said, you guys want to watch something? And it was, and we're figuring, all right, middle of the day, we'll watch something for 5-10 minutes. It was unedited, 2.5 hours from a stadium in Brazil. He never stopped working for 2.5 hours. The point that I would love to make about him is that he's not getting enough play for what he has contributed to the world musically. He is probably, arguably, the greatest musician we'll ever see in our lifetime. You'll never see anything like this again. That has to be discussed and mentioned.
So, the question to both of you, Cory, first on this is then how will the music industry be affected going forward now?
I don't really think that the music industry has taken a deep enough look at what Michael Jackson meant to everybody, all of us, artists, producers, actors, actresses, all of us, entertainment as a whole. I don't think that they took a deep enough look because everyone's too busy with, if I can say it, with their head too far up their own,
Yes. Yes.
their own butt.
Yes.
And I don't think they stopped. I mean, when Michael was on trial, nobody stopped to go and support him at the trial.
Yep.
The guy is acquitted on 10 counts of child molestation or whatever. No one said, sorry, Michael. No one said, Michael, we knew you were innocent. No one did a BET tribute to him then. Nobody played his music and did a marathon then. Nobody rallied up and did a concert. Why should Michael have to go on tour to raise money? How come all the artists didn't band together back then and say, hey, you know what? Let's do a tour like Michael did when he did the We Are the World tour, and let's raise some money. Let's get this thing going. No one did that. But
go ahead.
I'm sorry, but I don't know if you remember when there was a guy named Tookie Williams on trial in California.
Name sounds familiar.
Well, Tookie Williams is the founder of the Crips gang.
Yeah.
The Crips and the Bloods?
Yes.
Okay, and they were trying to get him, get him pardoned from the death penalty.
Yeah.
And half of Hollywood showed up for this man. And what I can't understand is, okay, people didn't want to go near Michael Jackson when he was in trouble.
But they show up for a murderer.
But they show up for a guy who executed families. A little girl begged for her life, and he executed her. And they said because he wrote, in his time in prison, he wrote children's books and he tried to turn his life around. He was nominated for a Nobel Peace Prize. Well, how about the millions of children that Michael Jackson has helped over his span of his career? Yet 2 children come with some false allegations, and those 2 children become the 2 children that destroy him. It's crazy. So it makes me look at the entertainment business and just say, I'm surrounded by a bunch of hypocrites. So when you ask me how it affects them, I don't even think they realize, what this is. Everyone's going to do their tributes, but the tributes now, if you look at it, it's all because now everyone's going to get some spotlight, they're going to get some shine. Now all of a sudden everyone wants to say something good about them.
Everyone wants to be relevant.
Everyone wants to be relevant, and that sucks to me.
Well, I'll play the public question, the matter at hand. After 93, should he have known better? Going on the Martin Bashir documentary, Living with Michael Jackson, years ago, and saying it's okay to share your bed with a child. Don't you think in some senses most people are going to say, well, he kind of set himself up for that?
Well, let me explain to you what was said to me directly from Michael.
Sure, absolutely.
Michael and I spoke about that, and he said, Cory, when I was a kid, I was denied not only a childhood, but I was denied love. When I reached out to hug my father, he didn't hug me back. When I was scared on an airplane, he didn't put his arm around me and say, Michael, don't worry, it's going to be okay. When I was scared to go on stage, he said, get your ass on that stage. Okay? And not just him, but every other adult around him. So he said to me, Cory, I will never deny a child love. And if it means that I have to be crucified or put in jail for it, then that's just what they're going to have to do. And so when it was time for him to stand trial, the first time he went through it and his advisors told him, Michael, this is not good. Pay this kid off and let's keep moving. Second time he said, you know what, all I did was make me look guilty like I was hiding something. So this time, there won't be any payoffs. I'm going to fight this in court, and you'll see I'll be innocent. And up until the day, right to the day when they finally had to read the verdict, and the verdict was in, I talked to his family, and they were, because I remember watching on the news, they said Michael had like 45 minutes to get there. And so I spoke to some of his family members who were in the house with Michael. And I said, well, what the hell is he doing? They said, well, he's upstairs, he's getting dressed. He came downstairs. He said a prayer with his family, and he told everyone, he said, I want you guys not to worry about me because I will be okay. And he rode there. He had maybe a little nervous energy, patting his feet and singing in the car and everything, and he rode with his brother and his sister. But he wasn't worried. I'm going to tell you something. I would have been a mess. I don't even know if I could have stood up like a
think
man in court like that.
I think we all would have been. Chris, any thoughts on any of this?
When I watched the Bashir thing last night, I just wanted to see what it was all about and reflect on that. And when Martin asked him about the first incident where he paid off these accusers, I found it very ironic, and it looked unbelievably sincere and honest the way he said, I just decided I wanted it to go away.
Mm-hmm.
And he made it go away. Which, by the way, again, not the first person to do this in the history of our business. He wanted to make it go away. The second time he fought. But to go back to what Cory was saying about his childhood and stuff like that, he was reflecting on the fact that he had acne as a kid, which we've all gone through at one phase of our life, and how his pop would always sit there and make fun of his acne and his skin condition. Now you're talking about a young kid here who never had the chance to grow up and be normal. He grew up very differently than a lot of people. Granted, he's Michael Jackson, but there's a lot of reasons why he had certain insecurities. And as for his bit with the second thing, I believe 1,000%, I'll go to my grave with it, that he was innocent completely. He was being blackmailed by that gentleman that wanted to be a screenwriter or write books or do movies, whatever. I mean, that was inside information that floats around enough that I can say it.
I mean,
come on,
Chris, not to cut you off, I'm sorry.
No, go ahead. Absolutely. You guys can.
You
can
know, the
shine
Martin
each other.
Bashiri thing, right? I mean, I don't think people remember that a week later, or maybe a few weeks later, Michael himself re-aired his own version of that show.
And he had the whole, because he video camered the thing as well.
Because he was smart enough to video camera it, and it clearly showed that the guy just twisted everything and made it, he turned everything into like a false or a lie.
Mm-hmm.
They asked Michael a question, are you gay? And Michael said, I don't want to answer that question. Now, that was the one that he said. So then it quickly edited to Bashiri going, obviously, he didn't want to answer for obvious reasons. Okay? So then when Michael showed his version, he said, are you gay? Michael said, I don't want to answer that question. And he paused. Then he said, but if you turn your camera off, I will answer your question. And then the guy said, okay, turn the camera off. He turned the camera off, and Michael said, no, absolutely not. I am not gay. But I have millions of gay fans. And if they want to believe I'm gay, then let them believe I'm gay. He said, I don't care. He said, I don't want to offend anybody.
I gotta say something here. I can't believe that at this point that these are even issues that are being discussed.
Yeah, I mean, this is crazy.
Anything about what this man contributed to the world. And I have a very good friend that Cory doesn't know that we know, that was working on this tour with him, someone that we worked with Cory with, another diva in our lifetime. And he said he was looking better than ever. He was struggling because it was a long, hard show, but this was going on. This was not, he canceled a couple shows, fine. This guy had 50 shows lined up. This was going. They were in Staples Center, full production. I mean, you're talking about a multi-million-dollar show.
Yeah.
This was going. And this poor kid goes home the night before and says he doesn't feel well. And bam, the next day he's taken from us. I'll use a word that Cory used. Probably the most devastating thing that I've ever had to deal with in my life. I feel like my right one has been taken from me.
Is there anything
that people have to pay a little bit of attention to what he contributed to the world and stop with all the wacko jacko stuff, which
but they won't, because that's what they like better.
Is there any?
Liza was very cool. I watched her the other night.
Yeah, on Larry King.
Sits there and says, "Stop," and she was talking to Larry King.
Yeah.
Said, "Stop. Come on. Let's celebrate for a little while. 3 to 4, the stuff will come out. People will start flipping. You'll start hearing stuff. The books will start. Sony's pressing records. I'm sure they got 4 plants going right now, repressing all his records."
Is there anything to be said, though, that after the second trial in 2005...
Sorry for that, Chris.
Yeah, no problem. Absolutely. Absolutely not a problem.
I'm just, I got to say honestly, and I'll let Cory take the floor here, I'm devastated by this.
Yeah.
I'm sad. I've been very emotional, and I'm going to actually go to my farmhouse this weekend where, Cory, I have all the original vinyl, and I'm pulling them all out. Someone's got to talk about what this man contributed and cut the crap.
I want to ask you, though, Bo, on a personal level, A lot of people say that maybe he wasn't the same after the second trial in 2005, and that things kind of went downhill, and he went through all these personal issues. And then, of course, there were the rumored health issues in the recent years. Any thoughts or any knowledge of either of those situations, or any thoughts on that? Is that true, do you think?
Here's the thing. I believe I know for a fact he had health issues.
Yeah.
Okay? That's number one. Michael Jackson had other health issues that never were discussed. Like, he had what's called dancer's feet.
Okay.
Okay? Dancer's feet is when your feet, over the years of dancing, a dancer wraps their feet to dance. Like, they wrap them in tape and things like that.
Yeah, absolutely.
But, of course, because you don't get enough oxygen and things, your skin dries up. Your skin starts to crack and splint, like almost like paper cuts. Okay? And Michael suffered bad with that. So what would happen is sometimes it'd be so bad he'd have to wrap his feet in a cast. And that's why sometimes you would see him with a cast on. Okay? The pain for that was excruciating. And, was he on the painkillers for that? Yeah, I'm sure he was. I'd never physically seen him take a pill or a painkiller, but I definitely have spoken to him about it. Now, whatever the autopsy shows, whatever the true fact on how this man has gone from here becomes, it is all still a result of what this business has done to him. Period. I mean, it's all a result of what the business did to him.
Fair to say that maybe the business, Chris can answer this one, that the business, because he had all the financial issues, that he was kind of pushed into a corner. He said he wanted to do 10 shows, and it became 50 for this thing in London that was supposed to happen next month. So, I mean, the reality is did he feel like he was backed in a corner because he had to fulfill financial issues? Is that fair to say, Mr. Apostle?
Listen, I'm sure he decided to do this comeback tour and had a bunch of cash, which he honestly deserved to have. But I don't think that I still think that, like Cory said, he was pushed to the brink by people that were extremely powerful, and he was not treated fairly. We always started in this business, and someone that Cory and I knew very well said, you can't do anything in this business without the artists. Even if the artists are what you consider to be the worst thing in the world and stuff like that, you still need the artists. Well, it seems to me that the big cheeses in the business forgot that at some point where he was concerned.
This was
issues I can't answer anything on. I'm not privy to anything. I mean, I read what everyone else.
Well, here's the deal.
Sure.
This was years ago. I'm going to go back probably 8 years ago. And Michael told me, Cory, I can't tour anymore. I'm not going to tour anymore. Okay?
Mm-hmm.
And I said, why, Mike? He said, because it'll kill me. That's what he said to me. He said, it'll kill me. I said, well, why would you say something like that? He said, well, he said, remember when I was preparing for my concert and I passed out at the Sony studio? He said, well, it's because when I get ready for a tour, I get dehydrated, I don't eat, I don't drink, I don't sleep. I put so much of myself into preparing for a tour that he said, I'm not doing it on purpose, it's just something that I don't even think about anymore. You understand? I just become so driven that I can't even think about these other things anymore. He said, they made me walk around with an IV last time. He said, so I just decided, and my doctors all decided that maybe you shouldn't do this anymore. He said, so he wanted to make the Invincible album work to the point where that was it. He's done with the tour. He was going to do this Invincible album. He wanted to continue to put out albums. He said, I'll put out an album. I'll do albums until I can't do it anymore. But I just can't tour.
Is it fair to say then maybe the downfall of Michael Jackson were people who were greedy and wanted, obviously the $85 million that the ticket sales had sold for the thing over in London, for example. Is it fair to say that greed got the best of him and other people that forced him into a situation?
I wouldn't call it greed. I just don't think that he had a choice.
Yeah.
I think financially, sometimes we all do what we have to do. I mean, it's the same reason that a boxer like Joe Louis would go after he was long, into retirement. Joe Louis still got in the ring and had to fight.
Yeah.
Because he had no money.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying Michael didn't have any money.
But he owed $400 million.
But he did have debt.
He owed $400 million supposedly.
Oh, yeah, he definitely had debt.
Yeah.
So it's like, okay, when you got debt and you got people, hawking you down and doing all of this stuff, okay, Michael, one more tour and let's clean up this debt.
Yeah.
Okay, well, you know what? The person that he is, the entertainer he is, okay, well, let's get to work.
Yeah. What I'm curious is, in the fact of, it's a surprise to many, but at the same time, is it one of these great tragedies we're going to look back upon and say he had all the highs, but he had all the lows also?
I would say my deepest prayer to ask God to just give this man peace and hope that his legacy, lives on, and it's untainted with all of the bullshit, if I can say. But I'm afraid that forever it's always going to be a problem. Just like there's always all kinds of crazy things said about, whatever, Elvis Presley,
How he died, yeah.
How he died.
The conspiracy theories.
A conspiracy theory. How did Bruce Lee die? How did Marilyn Monroe die? You know what I'm saying? Michael is not comparable to these people, I would say Elvis Presley is the closest you'll get to that. But even Elvis, I mean, it had to be an Elvis, I'm sorry, it had to be an Elvis Presley's career, even for Michael to stand on those shoulders and move beyond that.
Yeah.
You understand? So
Yes.
I'm not going to discredit Elvis Presley, but they're two different people. And Michael, as far as I'm concerned, surpassed Elvis and everything that Elvis was about, a long time ago. And he stood for something different. Michael Jackson stood. No one talks about when he did the Victory Tour. I remember as a kid, Michael being on tour with the Victory Tour, right?
Yeah.
And every night on the news, they would announce that Michael Jackson donated his money from every city that he did. He donated it to a new charity. He donated his money from the Victory Tour to charities.
Yeah.
So I thought that was amazing. I'm like, wow, this guy's donating millions of dollars every night to a new charity.
Yeah.
And then he would stop in every city. He would stop at a hospital and visit kids that were burned, ill, or whatever. He took the time to do all of that.
Chris, any thoughts?
So two things. One, comparing, the Elvis-Michael comparisons are obvious considering, what they were to the American culture and actually the world culture. Difference is Elvis, I believe, died at 42.
Mm-hmm.
And Elvis, the most money he's ever made has been after he died. Far more than he made while he was alive. But to go back to the highs and the lows, all artists have highs and lows. Most of the lows are generally contributed to the lack of creativity. The skill diminishes, the body goes, etc., etc. Michael had the highest of highs, and if you remember the highest of highs, there's never going to be anything like that in our life. Number one, the albums were brilliant, performances were brilliant, he was brilliant, he was an icon, probably the most famous person in the world. I think his lows weren't totally attributed to creative decline. I think the lows were forced upon him, and he was put into caves and holes by people doing things to him, and that to me is really sad. Artists get old, like athletes. They change, they go on different tours, they start playing the casinos, they start picking up the city festivals, the package tours, etc., etc. This guy was forced, he was forced to go lower than an artist should ever have to go, and it wasn't because of lack of skill. Something about Michael that people don't realize is I would call him a musicologist. This guy knew every song ever recorded, every studio, the whole Sun Studios thing, Memphis, you name it, Motown, New York, L.A., everywhere. He knew everything, the musicians, the instruments, the mics. No one talks about this. No one discusses this, and this is it's unbelievable. And by the way, unlike Elvis, This guy was doing it still for, what, 43 years?
Yeah, I mean...
43 years, Chris.
Yeah.
Yeah.
My God, man.
I think, looking at this whole industry and the way things have been moving forward now and more, it's about, like, the name value, as you like to call it, over the musical, bona fide musical talent. I want to ask you both, because you guys have been, you've worked with everybody and you've moved on to new things, but is the music industry crumbling in some sense? I mean, there's talents out there that are going to do well, obviously, always, but is it crumbling in a sense that, we don't have these huge identities, these larger-than-life figures anymore? It's just kind of like one act after another.
You know what's about to happen? I want to answer this real quick, Chris, and then you can answer, from where you see it. But I feel like because of the newfound independence that the internet has given us all.
Yes, absolutely.
I think we're in a kind of like a like a whole new revamping stage.
A transitional stage.
Well, I always say it's a transitional stage for sure.
Yeah.
But when I say revamping, I would say an incubating stage, because right now we're about to witness the rebirth of real music. And that's because, there was a time when you can have an Earth, Wind, and Fire like, or Michael Jackson like, off the wall sounding record that someone worked their ass off on independently, and it sounds good, but a record company wouldn't even give it the chance, because if it didn't sound like Chris Brown or Rihanna, that's not what they were looking for. But now, independently, when that becomes like the most played thing on the internet, and people have no choice but to roll with it, record companies start to get behind it, we'll be back to people not being pigeonholed or feeling like they have to follow suit with what's going on just to get a deal.
Chris, your thoughts?
It's been a longer transition than most people would expect. The industry is not dying. I mean, if you look at certain aspects of it, Live Nation is having their biggest years now with the touring industry. I mean, with the 360 deals, it's obviously different for artists, labels, etc. The labels, you used to have creative people working under the executives and labels, but now you have the executives maintaining their salaries by making sure they have no staff. So you don't have people. I went to see a group tonight in New York, a kid that's showing up all over the place. Every label was there. It was all low-level people with no signing power. It's different. They can't sign bands. They can sign one band at a time. As for the internet and stuff like that, I have an opinion about the fact that, all the genius that we all profess to, myself and Cory and everyone we've worked with, 5-6 years ago, this industry suddenly decided that, I liken it like this, trying to sell the public, remember the car, the Hugo?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, sitting there saying, you know what, we've come up with this great car. It's a Hugo. And people are like, well, wait, I've heard that there's this really cool car out of Germany called the Mercedes. No, you want to have the Hugo. Well, wait, I hear BMW makes a pretty good car. I hear Chevrolet Escalade is really hot, whatever. No, you want the Hugo. The industry that we worked in that came up with all these huge artists, Michael included, the U2s, the Bruce Springsteens, the Dylans, suddenly decided that, you know what, we're going to give you Lindsay Lohan. We're going to give you Paris Hilton. We're going to give you Kelly Osbourne. And the public sat there and said, this is the best you have to offer? I'm not paying $17.99 for this. The hell with this. I'll steal one song off the internet. And the labels were slow to come to form, realizing that it was changing. And now they're getting screwed because of it. Bands are doing it independently, Chris. They're doing it differently. If you notice the live concert situation, the records that sell, if you look at the top 40 sound scan, you'll probably see 5 country artists, 5 Disney artists, 2 or 3 older artists. Live, people listen to Bruce Springsteen, U2. Why do you think, quote-unquote, country Keith Urban is so popular? It's not that people like country, and Keith Urban is definitely not country. It's the singer-songwriter. They want to hear songs. Talking about Michael, he made songs. The bands that last for a record, they don't have songs. They don't have staying power. When you're 21 years old, I always ask people, name, and I'll answer the question, but name 5 artists under the age of 20 that were truly geniuses. And they sit there and ponder everything, and I sit there and say, all right, I'll give you a few. Stevie Wonder, Prince, Michael Jackson, a Mariah Carey that was truly legitimate at that time in her career, and then there's one or two others. But you see where I'm going with this.
Yeah.
Now you have every band out there that's 20-year-olds, and they can't play.
Well, they can, and being a producer, what you find is, see, I grew up in my household. When I was a kid, the Isley Brothers would be in my living room rehearsing with my dad. My dad was a producer as well.
Yeah, I know that. Yeah.
So, I grew up and I couldn't wait to get in the business and kind of do it that way. And then all of a sudden I got in the business and I found that, well, Cory, that's kind of like too much. That people don't want to hear the live band thing and the live instrument thing. So all of a sudden I had to force myself how to make music based on 8-bar loops and, write things that, like repeat around the repetition.
You felt like you were dumbing yourself down.
I had to dumb myself because, when I first started when I first started producing, I was producing strictly to make some money so I could take care of my family.
Absolutely.
So I had to follow suit. So I was never, ever, ever happy. I got very happy when I got the chance to work with a Mariah Carey or a Michael Jackson or someone like that because I knew I could be me.
Yeah.
But, there's been, artists that will remain nameless that it's like I've had to just sit there and just do it basically because it's for a check and not for love. You
also grew up surrounded by monster players.
Oh, absolutely. But
Cory never mentions it, but he'll never mention it. But one of the things that I'm most impressed by musically is I'll go to his house and he'll sit at the piano without the musical training. And I came from classical training. Cory can sit down and play the whole Stevie Wonder book, note for note.
It's pretty amazing.
That shit any day of the week.
That's pretty freaking amazing.
Well, what's crazy? When I was a kid, I remember seeing a guy walk down the street like with a bass guitar on his back. Or I remember seeing a guy carrying, like, in his car, like he's got his drums or this. And I was fascinated, like, wow, this guy's a musician. Now, a guy walked down the street with a bass on his back or walk in a studio session, someone will laugh at him, like, where the hell are you going to? Like, what is this, a parade? What are you doing? They don't get it, a horn player. Like, they don't exist anymore.
Oh, you can't make a living.
Yeah, so I feel like now that the internet is what it is, it's okay to make those records because now they'll get past those gates that where people go, oh, I'm sorry, we don't allow that music here. Now it's going to go right past that, right over their heads, and be out there, and all of a sudden you're going to start hearing music that sounds so organic, so good, so stimulating that it's going to go right back to where it needs to be.
Well,
Matthews then.
Mm-hmm. Well,
good one for you guys.
Yeah.
You both know Steve Lukather, the guy that played most of the guitar on all of Michael's records, was the leader of Toto, etc. And this is not a plug, and it's going to sound like one, but it's not meant as a plug. His son is 19 years old. Now, this kid grew up in Los Angeles, 4 houses down from Eddie Van Halen. His father did every record from Boz Scaggs to Michael Jackson to Lionel Richie. I mean, you name it, his dad has played on him. This kid is the most brilliant prodigy rock and roll guitar player in the world today. He can't get arrested.
I know.
Can't get arrested. I would put him up against anyone, and people hear him and they're horrified. He can't get arrested.
Yeah, I know. It's disgusting.
But the players, listen, it's changing, yes, but it's going to fine. The industry sold 1.3 billion records last year instead of 1.5.
Oh, the record, it's all a hoax. I just want you to know that if you really do some research and look at the statistics on the amount of records sold in the industry now versus over the last 20 years, we're only down by like a few million records. It's like 10%. It's nothing crazy. Nothing crazy. All of that internet nonsense is just a hoax. Because the record companies, the majors, always felt like, wait a minute, if we don't start to, put the word out, keep people off the internet, we're going to lose ground here.
Oh, I got blasted at Sony once, and I'll say this. I made a suggestion once that I think we should allow every new artist to have their first single downloaded as many times as the fans want, for free. I was well, you don't want to work here very long. I said, no, I do. They said, well, our publishing division's not going to like that, and neither are the artists. I said, you know what? Maybe you'll get 3 out of 5. Maybe you'll get 2 out of 3. They'd love the artist, want to buy the single. and do this. But this was after talking to my niece, who was like 13 at the time. I said, what record store do you go to? She goes, record store? I said, well, there's a Coconuts around here. There's still a Sam Goody is still in that time. And she goes, I haven't been to a record store in 3 years. I said, you got 100 CDs in your room. She goes, get them off the computer.
Yeah. Because she's buying it from Amazon.com.
Mm-hmm.
She's buying it from Amazon.com.
Right. I mean, that's what's happening. Amazon, iTunes, whatever. You know, I'm telling you, music is gonna get it's gonna get really good now. It's gonna get interesting. It's gonna get good, and everyone's gonna see. I mean, because even I don't know if you got a chance to see what BET tried to do the other night, but
it was horrible. It was a train wreck. It was a train wreck.
It was horrible. It just made no sense.
Not even Janet.
And here's the shame. Let me tell you the shame of it all. Right?
Okay.
The best performance of the night was the OJ's. And they're old guys, but they just bring the truth. Everything else is just garbage.
Well, it's kind of like, you know, not to steal you guys away from the conversation, but it's kind of like when you talk to a Mary Wilson of the world from the Supremes, as I did recently. Yeah. It's like, those are the Supremes, those are the Beatles, those are groups that are going to be around forever. Those are people that are part of music history.
Yeah.
And you look at the acts today, and you're going to say to yourself, like, how many of these acts are we going to remember really in 50 years? You know what I mean? You know what I mean? But the Beatles, the Supremes of the world will be around forever.
No one's special right now.
Exactly.
The OJs was special. The Beatles was special. Why were they special? Because they sat down and they worked on being special. The combination of John Lennon and Paul McCartney writing, and I don't know if you ever pay attention to the fact that they always were kind of like opposite or contrary of each other.
Yeah, exactly.
That was the way they were, and that's what made it crazy. It was brilliant.
And now everybody just wants to go make a record, collect a paycheck, and go home.
Oh, yeah, 8 bars and blah, blah, blah. And also everyone wants to dance. They have the audacity to say that Chris Brown is the next Michael Jackson.
Are you freaking kidding me?
I'm like, you gotta be
serious.
I know, but I'm saying, are you freaking kidding me? They might be serious, but are you freaking kidding me?
Yeah, I mean, that's the way I felt about it. So, you know, look, I really can get into this whole thing and go crazy about it, but I said to myself for years, okay, there's times when I try and be different, but then there's other times where I sit there in the studio and I say, I cannot believe that I'm working with this person, and this is what it is. And then they all have the nerve to have attitudes. And then you work with a guy like Michael Jackson, who, you know, when he was late to come, we were supposed to be in the studio at 12, and he showed up about maybe, 1:15. He felt so terrible for being late. He apologized through the whole session. The next day, he sent a big, giant basket, because we were talking about movies and that how much I love movies. So he sent me this giant basket. I'm telling you
with all
something.
These different movies in it.
Oh my goodness! It probably had 100 DVDs. It had popcorn, candy, all kinds of books and movie trivia books, all kinds of stuff. You know, and again, the card said, "I'm very sorry for not respecting your time."
Well, true professionals in the entertainment industry, for example, when they're late to an interview with me, will apologize beforehand, and I will tell them no problem whatsoever and go on with it, but it's the thought that counts, absolutely.
Right. I would say, Mike, he would say, I said, what time do you want to start tomorrow? He says, whatever he said, Cory, you're the boss. You tell me what time. He said, if you want me here at 7 in the morning, I will be here at 7 in the morning. He said, you are the boss. Whatever you tell me.
What I find interesting about those comments, though, is the way the mainstream media projects it, is that he wanted to always do things his way. And you're telling me...
Not at all.
Yeah.
Not at all. That's what I said. It's like no one... If the world would just stop and just really pay attention, you know... There's a video... What was the... I was like, was it called Monster or something like that he did?
I don't know. Mr. Apostle?
I don't remember what it was.
Thing that I was going to kick in on, stepping back a minute, talking about what's out there now, is I'm horrified to think of the Michael Jackson tribute that are going to come out. I'm horrified to think of what his family may attempt to put out. I'm horrified to think of what records the labels are going to attempt to put together.
You know, the one thing that I'm looking forward to coming out is Michael had been sitting on all of the footage of the Victory Tour because he owns all of the footage of the Victory Tour. So, you know, I used to beg him all the time, please. As a matter of fact, I do have a DVD.
Give me an advance copy before the public gets to see it. Give me an advance copy, yes.
Like, I have a DVD of an unedited, you know, it's just a straight...
It's just the straight thing. It's the straight footage.
Tour. Yeah, it's the straight footage.
Yeah.
Maybe Cory will play it for you sometime.
Yeah, I mean, I have that, and I'm...
Or he'll let me borrow it, and I promise I'll return it later. You know what I mean?
It's amazing. And you know what? The guy did not lip sync. His voice sounded so amazing. It was ridiculous. You know, and it's like, and he did all the dancing, he did all the stuff like that. It's just that he conditioned himself to be able to do that.
And one artist have I ever seen, an entirely different animal, that I've ever seen 2+ hours on stage, and Michael usually went 2.5, at least that one concert we watched was close to over 2.5 in Brazil, I think it was. Mm-hmm. The only one that's close to that pulled it off single-handedly and did all the work, Bruce Springsteen.
Bruce, I know you were going to say that. Yeah, Bruce.
Never stops, never leaves the stage. When Michael was leaving the stage, it was for 1 minute to change his clothes, and it was a real 1 minute. It wasn't the 10 minutes, you know, with the 12 beauty police in there. He was back on, and by the way, has anyone bothered, speaking of his dancer's feet, has anyone bothered to look at how this kid danced? I mean, who idolized Michael Jackson? Fred Astaire.
Yeah.
I mean, come on.
You know, it's so many stories. I mean, there's so many things. Michael, you know, he loved to sit and tell stories. He loved to talk about everything. You know, every time he came to like a city or something, you know, I remember he wanted to go to the bookstore. They closed the bookstore down. He'd go to get books. He'd read. He'd educate me on Africa and how beautiful Africa is. And he said, you know, people don't want you to know how beautiful Africa is because, you know, they're over there robbing it of all its riches. But he said, it's the most beautiful place I've ever been in my life. You know, and he brought me pictures, and, you know, it's just amazing. And then, you know, David Blaine, remember David Blaine buried himself alive?
Yeah, sure.
And
he used to hang out on our floor at Sony. You don't remember it, but he used to hang out up there.
Oh, I know.
Around the time your friend 50 Cent was running and getting us coffee.
Yeah, I know.
This is a very random story, but continue. This is a very funny random story, but as you were saying.
Oh, well, no. So David Blaine buried himself alive in the city over by the Trump building or something.
Trump National Towers.
Right. And when I told Michael that was going on, he was like, you gotta be kidding. I said, I'm telling you, he didn't even know who David Blaine was. So I started, like, you know, sending for, like, video footage and everything, because we didn't have YouTube then. So
yeah.
I started sending for footage and everything to explain to him who David Blaine was. He was so fascinated. We got in a van that night, right?
Yeah.
And we went to see David Blaine. Late at night, we went over there. We jumped out the van, and he had like a kind of partial disguise, and no one really knew it was him. And he jumped out and walked right over there. We sat there, and he was fascinated by it.
Yeah.
It was funny. Then we were laughing, you know, because sometimes he said, you know what, half the time, you know, someone's going to think it's an impersonator, not me anyway. So sometimes I can just jump out.
I have to ask, and this is because, you know, you seem to have had a lot of personal conversations with him, but did you ever talk with him about the plastic surgery?
Yep.
And what did he tell you?
He said, what's the difference in me and Sylvester Stallone and everybody else in Hollywood? He said, so what? He said, listen, he said, my skin disease, he said, I don't want to be white. He said, that's not what I'm trying to do. He said, but, you know, I couldn't help my skin disease. He said, I did try a surgery to even it all out and do things like that did not turn out the way I wanted it to turn out. But that's not the reason I turned into a light-skinned, you know, black man, you know. But as far as his nose, he said, as far as my nose, I hated my nose just like Sylvester Stallone hated his.
That's what he said his father told him.
Yeah, he said, you know, I mean, he said, I hated my chin, I hated my nose. You know, he said, and so what? He said, why is it just me? He said, why is it just me? He said, if someone asked me, he said, why is it just me? He said, I can show you 20 people in Hollywood that's got nose jobs, lip jobs, Botox, all kinds of stuff.
Well, the question is going forward, looking at this whole thing and looking at this whole situation, I guess wrapping up with both of you, and I thank you both for your time this evening. Is there anything else you'd like to share, and we can go in any direction you want about Michael?
Well,
Let me go first, and then because Cory's better to sum this up than I am, Chris. The only thing I want to share is my only story is my uncle. I have one story and then my thoughts. My uncle used to be very close friends with Bill Cosby.
Okay.
And in the late 60s, he handed me one of the first records I ever had. I think the first record I had was the Monkees. And then he handed me a Michael Jackson, Bill Cosby record that they did. That I still have. It's kind of like a yellow submarine with a beautiful booklet inside. One of the most cherished possessions I have, and I can't wait to see it on Saturday. On my thoughts with Michael Jackson, disregarding anything else, is that I just hope that the landslide that's going to come out in the next couple of weeks, if some people start taking the high road, it ain't going to be the New York Post and the Daily Mirror and stuff like that, but I hope that some people start discussing all the good that he did. Because if you weigh the good against the bad, my God, he's the most famous person in the world. It's been on TV 24/7 for 6 days. I mean, that's just my hope, and God bless him and let him rest in peace. And, we'll all see him someday later on in our life, and I'm sure he'll be singing and dancing his ass off.
As far as I'm concerned, and I actually, Sunday, I went to church and I spoke to my pastor at my church.
Yes.
And I said, because I wanted to be clear on something, I said I wanted to make sure that I'm not going to get attacked or get in any trouble by, expressing myself the way I had been expressing myself. I said not to compare anyone to Christ, because there is no comparison to Christ. But if you just look at for a second, like this world that we live in within God's world, which is called the entertainment world.
Yeah.
Okay?
Fair enough.
Michael, to me, I can only tell you to me, and I'm sure I can get you dozens and dozens and dozens or hundreds of thousands of people who feel the same. Michael Jackson was like a Christ-like figure for us. Okay? And to know that this man over the last 15 years has been torn down, crucified, slandered, bad-mouthed, everyone would rather talk about something negative, like he wanted to buy the Elephant Man's bones. So what? You know what? I would buy them too.
Yeah, me too.
I think it's cool. I would do it too. But because it was him, they always had something negative instead of something positive. So my heart is completely broken. My inspiration, the light of inspiration that I once had from a kid is completely dim at this point for me. I mean, I don't know, because I was not one of the disciples or whatever that followed behind Christ and had to look at him, being crucified and hung from a cross. But I'm sure their hearts were broken just as well.
Yeah.
And my heart is broken. And moving forward with this business, all I can say is that I'm happy that there is a time now that we live in where we can kind of do things independently, and we don't have to deal with the hypocrites as much. But we are surrounded by hypocrites in this business. And, it's just a tragedy. I mean, I always wondered what it would be like, if something, God forbid, happened to Michael, and I don't think I ever really wanted to feel it. I just always kind of wondered, like, my goodness, what would happen? Yeah. Well, here we are. And so far, everything that's happening is pretty much exactly what I thought was going to happen.
Cory said something really... Cory and I speak countless times every day. We have for basically the last 20 years.
I can tell.
When this happened, as I was emailing Cory, and at one moment I got his wife on the phone, but that was it. I didn't hear from Cory for 3 days. Emails, phone calls, no answers. I knew that he was mourning, and I was distraught about this.
Because I cried for 3 days.
You called me up Monday morning, and I think it's a very appropriate coda here. You called me up and you said, Cory, I'm basically almost word for word on this. Okay, it's Monday, we got to go back to work, because Michael would have gone back to work.
Mm-hmm. And that's the truth.
Very poignant to me.
Michael would have gone back to work, and you know, like I said, he took his bumps, he took his bruises. He was one of the toughest men I ever met, and that's the truth.
Yeah.
He was a rugged, tough guy. There was nothing timid about Michael Jackson.
Well, it seems like, you guys have told me a different story that the mainstream media is totally not focused on in this last 5 days, and I'm not surprised by that because the mainstream media rehashes a lot of things. But the point is what you're saying to me then tonight, really the fact is that the industry, the media that is the industry, is not totally focusing on really how important this guy was to music as a whole. In closing.
No. Close. They're not even scratching the surface.
Well, maybe because maybe they're just not informed, or they're not educated, or as you know, on this 24-hour news cycle, ladies and gentlemen, they don't care anymore. It's about what do I put out, how quickly do I put it out, and who's listening.
Yeah, but I think that I think they go off the fact like everything else in the world. They go where they say, you know what, this news right here. I mean, it's the very reason papers like the Inquirer exist. It's like we can capitalize off of the dirt.
Still exists. They could be gone tomorrow, ladies and gentlemen. I'm not sure if either of you heard, but Vibe magazine, for example, folded today. Another music publication. Yes, it sure did. Wow. So let me just say, with the tabloid outlets online that you can get, and they're updated 24/7, I would not be surprised if the National Enquirer would join that list. And I don't know if you guys know this, but they've been having financial issues in the last 6 months also. So, the point is that it's all going online. Regardless, it's all going on.
Well, I believe that anyway. That's what I said. And you know what? It gives the freedom to people like yourself to be able to do something right.
Yeah, sure.
And
on the
instead of trying to follow suit, to say, because look, the Inquirer, Star Magazine, all those things, they posted, they position them right at like that cash register when you go in, and it says some crazy shit on the title, on the cover, like, Michael Jackson sleeps in the hyperbaric chamber.
No, it was Obama's gay last week.
Oh, God. You see what I'm saying?
Apostles, that was a great chime, and you are perfect timing, Mr. Apostle. His timing is impeccable.
So that's what I'm saying. It's like, enough of that. Like, I think they're going to always opt to take opt for the
lowest form and common denominator. The lowest form of the common denominator.
Right. Instead of saying, let's do a head count and see how many children Michael Jackson actually changed their life or did anything. And here's another last fact that no one ever touched on.
Sure, why not?
Both the boys that allegedly accused Michael were both kids that were involved or their parents were in prior scams or something like that.
I remember the recent one. She tried to get her kids to fall over like in J.C. Penney's and then sue for harmful injuries or something from them.
Yeah,
I remember that. Yes, I do.
And then they tried to do something with George Lopez.
I did not know that one.
Yeah, they tried to say that he stole their money out of the Comedy Store when they went to the Comedy Store or something like that. Said that he robbed one of their wallets or stole from them.
What's funny about that whole situation, though, is looking back on it, maybe 10 seconds was mentioned, and that was mentioned once during the whole trial coverage, and the the witnesses at hand, the mother and obviously the kid. They mentioned about 10 seconds of that, and they mentioned it once, and it wasn't like, reminding you, just remember that, the witnesses and the ones, obviously, suing Michael Jackson for these legal charges and had these criminal things against him were trying to, obviously, they were scam artists beforehand.
Right.
They tried to pull something, but that history was not brought up.
Because it's not important to the public.
Because it's not important to the public because they're not somebody prominent who is anyone's going to care about it, and they're going to be like, who is this person again? Who are you telling me about again?
Yeah.
Well, I'll give you my summation on the media, and then I'm going to be finished with this. The media this media frenzy started, and I'm not pointing guilt or anything. I'll go political for 1 second here, but it started with O.J. Simpson. It segged into Bill Clinton. They basically beat the heck out of Bill Clinton, okay? They went after George Bush, who I did not like, didn't support, but they did a really good job on him. Now, they'll go after Michael Jackson. And don't kid yourself, in a year or two, they're going to go after my president also. That's how they...
Well, they went after Michael Jordan with the gambling,
he had gambling and infidelity, and that's nothing surprising, honestly, anyways, for the world of sports and entertainment. Many of these guys, that's their business.
And they do stupid things. Kobe Bryant really fucked up. He really fucked up.
Yeah.
You understand? But, it destroyed him, and right away they ushered in, here comes King LeBron James. They
from high school, and then he, and he's handled it pretty actually decently well, better than most people thought he probably would, not to get off topic. But, I agree with you in every case, in every form. So as we wrap up this conversation, Cory Rooney, thank you so much. Chris Apostle, thank you so much. This was an interesting, almost hour conversation about the life of Michael Jackson, and hang on with me, ladies and gentlemen. This is Chris Shandek.